We all know why sometimes we see monkeys wandering around the neighborhood. We're cutting down trees, taking more and more lands to build homes, office buildings, factories, etc., etc. We get it. But we are too small to help, right? We need a place to live as well. What can we do? Well, I'm certain that we don't have to give up on our homes to save them. Maybe, just maybe, we might have to adjust our lifestyle a little bit, just to buy some time. We'll get to this part at the very end. The basic idea here is deforestation, then monkeys out in the city. But what happened before? What is happening now? And what is going to happen after? Is what we are going to talk about in this video. When I was a little kid, I learned from the school that cars and factories are bad because of the smoke. When I grew older and became a teen, I was taught that plastic was, still is, bad for the environment. Now that I've become an adult, it's about the clouds. All this can be rather confusing. We briefly learn from the media about what is causing the climate change, but we might not know exactly why and how. This is why I want to do this video, and we are going to learn this together. This is certainly a huge topic, so I've done a little mind map here to make things a little bit clearer. Oh, I also added the big corps and governments in since they are the executors here for this whole thing, who set policies, run businesses, plans for bringing us not only the essential stuff like a shelter, food, jobs, and many, many more stuff for us to buy. However, at the end of the day, we are the ones who have the right to decide whether or not we want or need to buy. What do we buy? Everything. Let's just start with food. Where do all our food come from? The farmlands. By growing plants and animals, we call this agriculture. When we grow or raise something, be it plants or animals, we need lands, lots of lands. But how much of the land do we need exactly? Well, it depends on how big our appetites for our food. Our Earth is this big, and the land surface, which means the total size of the Earth, minus out the ocean, and we get this. The land surface only takes up 29%, while the ocean takes up 71% of the Earth. In this 29% of land, only 71% of which is habitable, which means it's the lands that humans, animals, plants, insects, bacteria can live on, and these are known as living organisms. The rest of the places are just glacier, desert, exposed rocks, salt flats, where it's not suitable for living organisms to live on. In this 71% of the land, half of which is used for agriculture, and 77% of it is for livestock. That includes grazing. Grazing means the green lands that is full of grass that we use to feed the livestock like cows, sheep, and others. Other than that, we also grow crops that we can eat to feed the livestock so that they can get enough or more nutrients, hence a healthier and higher quality beef to be put on our plates. All in these 77% of the lands. The rest of it is for crops. We use these 23% of lands to grow plants to feed us. And this is what we have been learning from the media, all over the internet.
Beef is one of the most inefficient uses of resources on the planet. Cows produce methane.
Livestock causes more greenhouse gases than all the direct emissions from the entire transportation sector.
We're going to ban hamburgers.
They want to take away your hamburgers.
If we change towards a plant-based diet, we could feed ourselves on much less land. For too long, we have been waging a senseless and suicidal war on nature.
First thing first, we need to understand the keywords. Greenhouse gas. The word greenhouse itself means a glass building in which plants that need protection from cold weather are grown. This is a good thing. If we apply this to the Earth, greenhouse gas is a layer of protection to prevent the Earth from getting too cold. There are different types of greenhouse gases. Carbon dioxide, methane, nitrous oxide, and industrial gases are created by humans. These greenhouse gases can absorb infrared radiations from the sun's energy and trap the heat to keep the earth warm, or at least at the right temperature, so that we can enjoy sunbathing without burning our asses. Thanks to this natural process that is called greenhouse effect. Without it, the Earth would have an average temperatures of -18 degrees Celsius and be covered in ice where most of us can hardly survive. Greenhouse gases only become bad when there is too much of it. As mentioned, they absorb infrared radiation. It's called IR. IR is radiation heat. When there is too much heat, the global temperature rises, and it leads to global warming. Carbon dioxide and methane are playing the same role, but methane is more potent and much warmer than CO2 because it can keep more heat than CO2. Just remember that 1 methane equal to 21 to 23 carbon dioxide. So for the time being, you just have to know what these greenhouse gases are for, especially CO2 and methane. Don't worry about how this whole thing works first. I will break it down in another video because the script is just way too long and I don't want to cram everything in one video, which also means you won't be seeing any monkey for the rest of this video. Back to the media. I noticed that there are 3 key points that are often highlighted by the media. First, cows are more harmful to the environment because of producing too much of methane. Hence, we need to cut down meat consumption, and then this would help reducing the use of lands to raise livestock. Yes, it is true that we use a lot more lands to raise livestock, but what kind of lands that we use matters as well. Let's go back to the 71% of the land that is habitable. As mentioned, we use half of these 71% of the land for agriculture, and we call this 50% of the land as agriculture area. The use of agriculture area is divided into 3 categories. First, arable lands. Second, permanent crops. Third, permanent meadows and pasture. Arable lands have healthy and nutrient-packed soil to grow crops or doing plantations. Permanent crops are lands that are used to grow plants, which we call perennial crops, that last for many seasons, rather than being replanted after each harvest. For example, fruit trees, coffee, even Christmas trees. Permanent meadows and pasture, aka non-arable lands. These lands are not suitable for growing plants or crops, but it's okay to use for grazing. Here is how much of each type of land we have. 28% for arable lands, 3% for permanent crops, 69% for permanent meadows and pasture. The non-arable land. Since we have more non-arable lands, does it make more sense that we use much more of the lands for feeding the livestock via the method of grazing or pastoral farming? Does it mean that we are making good use of the lands because non-arable lands are not suitable to grow crops that can be our food anyway? Also, I found an interesting point from this channel called What I've Learned. He pointed out that the crops that we grow to feed the livestock are parts that are not edible to the human, and human stomach cannot digest them. If we were not feeding those inedible parts of the crops to the livestock, which can digest and get more nutrients from it, it would be a total waste. And this would help generating more food waste than we already have. And food waste is also another problem that contributes to climate change. So what media focus on when it comes to animal agriculture are? First, raising livestock takes up many lands, like the Brazil deforestations on Amazon. Second, cows produce methane when they fart, burp, chew, and poop. It's far more harmful than what the CO2 does to the environment. Proposed solution would be eating less meat. Really? First of all, it's not just cows that release methane. Food waste produce methane as well, 6% globally. It means the food that we cannot finish, we throw it away. The food that is or was left in the fridge until it gets expired and again, we throw it away. And before the food even arrives on our plates, there are tons of food are being thrown away because of not looking good for us, the consumers, to pick up in the supermarket, which is known as food loss. But how does food waste produce methane? When we throw away the food that we don't want, we create trash. And these trashes are being sent to the landfills. Landfills sit on the top of the soil, rotting because of the bacteria and fungi in the soil are decomposing them. During the process of decomposition, It releases methane. Okay, not only cows and food waste produce methane. Growing rice produce methane as well. Even wetlands produce methane. And it is not man-made but a natural source of methane. Still, methane. Ironically, we have been advocating the idea of the reductions of meat consumption and increase in crop production. Less meat, more veggies, right? Little did we know that an estimated 1.3 billion tons of food are wasted globally each year. It is 1/3 of all food produced for human consumption. And you know what are the top 3 of the food that we wasted the most? First, potatoes, beets, radishes, and carrots, 46.2%. Second, fruits and vegetables, 45.7%. Wait, aren't potatoes, beets, radishes, and carrots are vegetables? Okay, my best guess here would be the other types of vegetables except for the ones that I've mentioned. Just like tomato, it is both fruit and vegetables. I know, it can be confusing, just like the media. Third, tuna, salmon, shrimp, and other seafood, 34.7%. What about the animal source food like chicken, beef, pork, and dairy products? They are at number 6 and 7. So let's just not blame it on the cows. It's on us as well. It's actually always on us. Methane, a keyword that we have always heard from the media. When cow digests, it produces methane, which is known as CH4 in scientific term. It means 1 carbon plus 4 hydrogen atoms, which is a more harmful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And CO2 is 1 carbon plus 2 oxygen atoms, just so you know. As mentioned, methane is more potent than carbon dioxide because it is much warmer when it's being released to the atmosphere. The reason why they are heat-trapping greenhouse gas because the molecules inside CO2 and methane can vibrate vigorously that would be able to absorb infrared radiation, aka heat radiations, and 49% of which comes from the sun. So now we all get the idea that too much of CO2 and methane is not good for the atmosphere, the earth, the environment. When we hear the word atmosphere, we, or I, often think of the air that we breathe in every day. But it's actually these. There are 5 main layers of atmosphere. These 5 layers of gases are known as the air. As we go higher, the air gets thinner. The air we can breathe in normally is just in the layer of troposphere, which is the closest to the Earth. Thanks to gravity, all these layers of atmospheres can stay exactly where they are now. As we go beyond tropospheres, we get to stratosphere. This is where we put the weather balloons to get valuable information to make forecasts, predict storms, and use collected data like atmospheric pressure, temperature, humidity, and wind speed for research. Mesospheres is where the meteor is burning up once they get in from exospheres and thermospheres, because there are enough gases in mesospheres to cause friction and create heat. This is the highest at which the clouds can form, and we launch sounding rocket into mesospheres to check the atmospheric conditions and structure at heights beyond the reach of airplanes and balloons. According to the Fédération Aéronautique Internationale, once you go past the carbon line, you are in space. Thermospheres is where the astronauts hang out by floating around. And exospheres is the outermost layer of Earth's atmosphere. It's really far from the Earth, about 10,000 kilometers from Earth. There's no air to breathe and it's really cold there. When there is too much of CO2 and methane, it causes global warming. But what does it have to do with the cow? Basic idea here is cow digests the food and produce methane, which is worse than CO2. But interestingly, I found some information from Dr. Frank, who is a professor and air quality specialist in the departments of animal science at UC Davis. Dr. Frank is also a director of CLEAR Center, which has 2 cores, research and communications. It helps our global community understand the environmental and human health impacts of livestock. And this is what he says. For the record, I've rephrased and reordered his points a little bit here, and you can find the original video in the description. Alright, let's start with photosynthesis first. We have these in the air. The plants take CO2 out of the air, and these plants produce carbohydrates and oxygen. Carbohydrate is a molecule that has carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen atoms in it. These are called chemical elements, or just elements for short. Now we have carbon stored in these plants. Then the plant with carbon stored in it is being eaten by a cow. When the cow digests the food, which is the plants, a certain portions of that carbon in the plant is released as methane through burping, farting, shitting. In proper terms would be manual, the shit. A methane, CH4, is a carbon-containing molecule. 1 carbon plus 4 hydrogen. Methane has a very short lifespan compared to CO2. It's only in the atmosphere for 10 years while CO2 for 1,000 years. After 10 to 12 years, methane will be converted back into CO2 again. The amount of CO2 in the beginning went into the plants is the same amount of CO2 that results after methane is converted into CO2 again. It's a cycle. In Dr. Frank's words, if you do not add additional livestock to the farm or any other places, it means you are not adding additional methane due to hydroxyl oxidation. What is hydroxyl oxidation? Hydroxyl oxidation is the process of breaking down and converting methane to CO2, releasing this CO2 back into the atmosphere. Think of how an apple is turning brown when it's cut. Oxidation. The reactions from the apple's flesh with the oxygen when it's exposed to the air, which has oxygen in it, hence the browning. It's like hydroxyl oxidation, but the reaction is different from apple oxidation. Instead of turning brown, hydroxyl oxidation removes methane by breaking it down into CO2 form. But how? With apple oxidation, we have enzyme in the apple flesh and oxygen in the air to complete the reaction. With hydroxyl oxidation, we have this compound called hydroxyl radical, which is known as OH, 1 oxygen and 1 hydrogen. And its favorite thing to react with is anything with hydrogen atom in it, like methane. OH is formed when solar radiation, the sunlight, which breaks down the ozone. Ozone is also known as O3. It is called O3 because it contains 3 oxygen atoms. After the sunlight breaks down the ozone, the O3 into O1 and O2, O1 is called atomic oxygen because it has 1 oxygen atom. O2 is called diatomic oxygen because it has 2 oxygen atoms. 1 oxygen atom, which is O1, reacts with water vapor, which is H2O, in the atmosphere to form hydroxyl radical. Now we have 2 oxygen atoms and 2 hydrogen atoms. Combine them both, we get the OH. Here's the question. Since we have this natural detergent, the OH, to clean the methane, why are we still worried about having too much of methane in the atmosphere? First, too much of methane. If we keep producing methane through human activities, OH can hardly catch up to remove it. It's like you have tons of clothes and you only have like a bottle of detergent to clean all of them. It's not enough. So second, carbon monoxide, which is CO. The increase of CO will slow down the removal process, which is known as hydroxyl concentration removal. We get carbon monoxide from driving a vehicle and other activities that need to burn fossil fuel. Even when OH breaks down methane, it will produce carbon monoxide as well. I know there are a lot to take in, so I'm just gonna point out these key points that help us to gain insights and ponder upon the cause of climate change. First, most of the lands that we use for grazing livestock are non-arable lands, like pasture and grasslands, which are not suitable for growing crops due to low quality soil and other factors. We have to understand that not all lands are made equal. Growing crops requires high quality soil and it is climate dependent. Depending on the weather, for example, rainy season might be bad for certain types of crops and vice versa. Even if we were to just grow crops only as suggested and turning all vegan, we will also create a lot more waste from the inedible crops that are supposed to be fed to the livestock. Then the methane issue still persists. Food waste produce methane as well, remember? Of course, what the media has reported holds true as well. Deforestation does happen in countries like Brazil, which is the biggest beef exporter in the world, to deforest land for cattle ranching. However, what the media has been heavily focusing on over the years is about the large amount of land that we have used for raising more livestock to feed the humans. Hence, we need to reduce red meat consumption, then to reduce land use for livestock, then to reduce methane, suggesting to increase growing crops so that we can eat more veggies and less beef. What Dr. Frank suggested was the amount of CO2 and methane could put under control as long as we keep the quantity of livestock in check. It also means if we keep our diets in check, as in not overeating meat and have a balanced diet, then we can possibly control the number of livestock that we need. Since we are not asking for more and more meat to consume, then this would also keep the amount of CO2 and methane emission in check. But our population keeps growing, and this also means we need more food to feed more people. Maybe that's why the idea of veganism and vegetarian are on the rise. Third, if we were to successfully control the amount of livestock and the methane produced by the cows, given the fact that methane is 21 to 23 times more potent than CO2, its lifespan is way shorter, and at the end of the day, in Dr. Frank's words, it will still be converted back to CO2 again after 10 to 12 years due to hydroxyl oxidation. But keep in mind that CO can slow down the rate of hydroxyl oxidation, and CO is produced when we burn fossil fuels. Fourth, there was this chart from Bill Gates' interview that mentions about how we focus only on the electricity but not on the livestock that accounts for 24% of the greenhouse gas emissions by sector. Interestingly, if we were to combine these four sectors, electricity, buildings, manufacturing, and transportation together, which are sharing the use of fossil fuels for energy, it produces much more CO2 into the atmosphere, and that accounts for 66% of greenhouse gas emissions.
When people think of climate change, they think mostly about electricity. Unless you have a totally zero-emission way of making steel and cement, then you haven't come near to solving the overall climate problem.
Here's our fifth point, the last one. Animal agriculture seems not to be the main CO2 and the only methane contributor. Should the media put so much focus on animal agriculture? Or should we shift some of our attention to the one that produces CO2 the most in the world, fossil fuels? Of course, there's no black and white answer, and I can certainly not make a conclusion here. I'm just a nobody here who likes to ask questions and think of these questions for learning purpose. So do your own research and feel free to let me know what you found in the comment so that we can do some brain workout together. Now that we have touched on the agriculture and methane, it's time to talk about the primary greenhouse gas, carbon dioxide, in the next video. Bye now!
I don't think it's a competition between these problems. I don't think one could be put above the other. It's like saying, well, is global warming worse than ocean acidification, or is fishing all the big fish in the sea worse than polluting it? And I think it'd be foolish to try and single out any one of them to say this is how we're going to fix the planet's problems. We need to fight them on all fronts.